now, which of course is where's the rest of the money going to come from? So just to recap about the actual London Borough of Culture and how it's shaped. So we're looking at an up to £1.1 million investment, which is fantastic, from Mayor of London office, supported by City Bridge Trust. 30% of that, though, does need to be match funded. And also, we can talk a little bit about project funding, of course, because while there is the boroughs that are being funded, there's also projects. There's 50 to 200k per exceptional projects as well. So we can talk a little bit about that on this panel. So here we have a group of people who have pledged their support for London Borough of Culture in terms of their own organisations. So you've met Stuart, of course, Stuart Hobley at the end, who's the head of Heritage Lottery Fund. Next to Stuart, we've got Régis Cochefert, who is the Director of Grants and Programmes at the Paul Hamlyn Foundation. Joyce Wilson, next to Régis, who's the London Area Director for Arts Council England. Stella, who we all know very intimately now. We'll get to know even more. And Paul Harper next to me, who's Area Manager here at GLA Regeneration. So many of these guys here may be able to help in terms of that extra little bit of money that you need for your bids. So we're going to hear a little bit about how they can support, what might be the considerations that they're going to be looking at, and what other funding channels there might be out there for you. So first of all, and also you guys can ask questions at any time. So just wave, holler, if there's anything, so you just don't lose your train of thought, and I'll kind of look out for you as well. So first of all, I'm going to ask probably the funding organisations here about basically why you are here. Why London Borough of Culture? Why do you think it's important? Why do you want to be involved in it? So Stuart, maybe you can start.
Yeah, well, I think for us, the only money we give away is lottery money, so people who play the lottery, and there's lots of people across London who play the lottery, and we're very keen to make sure that our funding goes as far and as wide as possible. So this for us was a really exciting opportunity to get involved with a new way of doing something exciting that got people inspired by where they live, their sense of place of where they live. I think we've seen examples today and heard from people who have done that kind of citywide programming. Last year we did a grant programme in partnership with Arts Council and Historic England called Great Place Scheme, which again is really focused on a specific place and getting people excited and engaged. And I think we felt that's a really good opportunity. Once those two winning boroughs are announced, we'd like to sit down and have a conversation with them about how we can work with them to apply to some of our existing grant programmes to really help support that overall ambition in parallel with what they're going to do with the GLA. I think the other thing we'd like to do again with those winning boroughs is come up with some kind of marketing and promotion work once they've been announced to kind of encourage community groups within those boroughs to apply to us direct as well, so that they don't sort of feel like it's just the council that's getting the money. If there's a small group that want to do something to celebrate the history of where they live, maybe they could apply to us for a grant to kind of be part of that huge zeitgeist that will go on, that whole kind of crescendo, that celebration, and all just contribute to it.
Actually, maybe, I'm sure everyone here does know, but for those people at home, might be listening in, just give us sort of one line or something about Heritage Lottery Fund. What do you do? What do you
So, I mean, people often say to us, because they say that what do you fund, and it's a bit like family fortunes, and the first answer people always say is old buildings, and we say, yes, we fund old buildings. And then they say museums, and yes, we fund lots of museums. But actually, we fund community heritage projects, we fund projects about myths and legends, we fund green space, parks, we fund archive projects, community history stories. You know, we've done a project in the east of London about the history of grime music, which people sort of say to us, well, that's not terribly old, but the project was actually looking back over 100 years to do with planning and housing blight that all led up to the kind of creation of an art form where people expressed their desires and misfortunes in that way. So we fund a huge, huge variety of things. It's not just about old buildings or museums.
But heritage and memory and history sort of being...
being rooted in place, being what's important to people, about what makes them want to live where they want to live, what makes them celebrate the stories they do.
Brilliant, thank you. Régis, same question to you. Why are you here? What's your name? Where'd you come from? Now, why are you here? Tell us a bit about the Paul Hamlyn Foundation.
So Paul Hamlyn Foundation really is interesting in inequality of access. I think social justice is our golden thread. But throughout the history of the foundation, set up in '87, arts, education and learning through the arts is one of the tools that we believe passionately in, we believe can affect social change. So that sense of place really matters to us. And joining dots, we interesting in how something like the London Borough of Culture, but actually City of Culture, is bringing a lot of attention and a lot of resources in one place. And actually it adds to more than the sum of the parts. I think it forces that place to link, to actually have discussion, and not just present a united front for a great big video with lots of smiley children and old people, but actually it's the work that goes behind, where you are aligning your planning and your transportation and your housing and your employability from the bidder point of view, but where funder are thinking, well, where are the relationship and the partnership? Have you done your social asset audit, etc.? So for us, it's a really interesting to maximize impact. We might be in the 10 largest foundation in the country, but actually we're very small in terms of what we spend. 25, 27 million a year. Compared to public money, it's nothing. So how can we be catalytic? So an initiative like this, which gathers and links, I think has the potential to do much more than what it starts. And I'll mention what we're doing in Hull, because I think it's an interesting idea. We give money to Hull Culture Company because we believe they need support, and we made an early grant. But we've made 6 other grants to organizations in the area, which started before and will last after, in order to think how we can overlap areas of support to ensure a better legacy. But we did it in talking to the culture company. It was not them not getting the money. It was them identifying and helping us to spot where the difference could be made by linked funding. So the reason we haven't put an amount on what we might do for the borough that is successful and for the other projects, it's because if the applications are poor, we might not do much, but if the applications are good, we might do quite a lot. So we didn't want to cap it at £300,000 because that sort of seems quite irrelevant at this stage. So that's why I'm here and why we believe in it and why we think it's a great initiative.
Okay, great, thank you. Joyce at the Arts Council, tell us a bit about your investment.
So on Tuesday, I was doing a few media interviews for some reason, and one of the interviewers said to me, they said, well, come on, they said, isn't it the case, they said, isn't it the case that most great contemporary art comes from the gutter? And I was like, well, I prefer to call it grassroots, but it is certainly the case that work or projects, programs which are bottom up are certainly much more authentic. And they are certainly the projects which have the most impact for those communities and individuals who what we refer to as lowest engaged. So they're not currently really very engaged in the cultural life of this country, even of their own communities, certainly of their own boroughs. So we have been, as the Arts Council, very interested in looking at investing more in what we call place-based programming, place-based projects, which resulted in the partnership with Heritage Lottery Fund and Historic England on Great Place, also the Creative Places and People programme, and cultural destinations as well, where we're partnering with Visit England. So we really are very interested in looking at how can we invest in areas to really look at embedding, embedding culture, I suppose, in places where at the moment there may not be very much. So that's our primary interest in terms of London Borough of Culture.
Great, thanks. Paul, I'll come back to you in a second, Stella, but Paul, tell us a little bit about your role here as part of the Greater London Authority and part of the Regeneration team, and
okay,
what's the connection?
I work in the Regeneration team, and we run programs that are delivered largely by boroughs, and they're largely physical programs for physical change, so it's capital money. But we're super interested in working alongside the culture team on this project, and we've been working with them on developing the program, and we think there's a real opportunity to align the work that's being done through the revenue funding that's being made available through the Borough of Culture and the capital funding that can come through our team. Like the other panellists have said, our focus when we look at regeneration and trying to accommodate change and growth in London is to really find out about the places that are going to change, to look at their history, look at their local character, find ways in which they can grow, but they can still make the most of their assets and reveal some of the things that are more hidden, build on the local character that's there, and really authenticity has been something that each of us have mentioned, and I think that that's a key element as well, making the change authentic. And I think we can look at ways in which our funding can help support some of the physical infrastructure to help deliver some of these revenue-based projects. So there's a real opportunity moving forward to align those funding streams.
And what kinds of projects? I mean, obviously it's how long is a piece of string in many ways, but are there any specific things for each of you that you're like, this is really important from our point of view as an organisation? Joyce?
Yeah. So certainly from the Arts Council's perspective in London, so the priorities for London in terms of the Arts Council are first and foremost about diversifying the work. So it's our number one priority to look at how do we start to see work appearing in London which is much more representative of contemporary society. Now, we've got a programme which is called Creative Case for Diversity, and the national portfolio organisations that we fund are very familiar with that. The boroughs might be less so, but we're not talking there about audiences, we're not talking there about staff, we're talking about what the work looks like. So what does the work involve? What is it portraying? Who are the people that it's involving actually as practitioners? That's what we're looking at in terms of the Creative Case for Diversity, and we'd like to see that reflected in any bids that you make to us to support any of the projects or the winning boroughs, looking at anything that they might want us to support. We're looking as well in particular at skills development, talent development. That is very important to us, and also at just opening up opportunities for people. Now, we were asked to give examples maybe of projects that we've funded in the past that might be relevant here. So I'm going to give you two examples, one at both ends of the spectrum really of work that we support. And one is a really spectacular project which still had itself rooted in people, and the other one is just talking about the impact that something we funded had on an individual. And in terms of the spectacular, it would be the Great Fire Project, which happened last year with Artichoke, where Artichoke towed a barge full of explosives down the Thames, which I doubt very much they get to do this year, so thank goodness it happened last year. But at the heart of that, in which people might not realise, was that that was built by 100 young people, not in education, employment or training, who were taken on board and given construction and production skills to build that structure and a whole heap of other things that went on round about that project. And when we first introduced the carpenters to the idea that they'd be working with these young people, the carpenters were like, oh, come on, you know, we could build this in half the time. You're going to ask us to work with, you know, with these young people. It's going to slow us down. But within 24 hours of them starting work with these young people, they were absolutely sold on the benefits that the entire project was going to get from that intense working with those young people, and what they would be able to bring to the project, which again would give it that level of authenticity, which it wouldn't have if it was just a professional something or other that happened once, it was dropped in and then left. So it's really important that even if you're looking at something which is large scale and quite spectacular, work out ways that you can keep people involved in that you can make that experience real for them. And at the other end of the spectrum, I talk about Lewisham Live, which is a music festival, music and dance festival delivered by the young people of Lewisham. And I attended one of those concerts earlier in the year. And in between sets, they were talking to the young people about the instruments that they were playing. And there was this young boy, and he couldn't, from the look of him, he couldn't have been much more than about 9 or 10. And he had the most beautiful violin. I mean, it was the most beautiful instrument I think I have ever seen. It was gorgeous. And his grandfather had made it for him back in Rajasthan. And he was there that night using that violin to play as part of a jazz ensemble. And so he was using music and he was using that violin not just as a way of exploring, you know, classical Western musical traditions. He was using that violin and the opportunities that he was being given to push at cultural boundaries, to actually push at his levels of knowledge, to really push forward on his abilities, and to explore what his place was in the place that he found himself in. And he was great. I've got him pegged as a future Prime Minister. He was a really, really wonderful young chap. So again, I was saying, you think about what are these experiences going to bring to individuals. So you think about what are your strategies? Why are you going to be doing what you're going to be doing? What's at the core of it? Is it in terms of giving people skills and development? Is it in terms of allowing them to integrate and find their place in the world? What is at the heart of whatever it is that you are trying to do with your Borough of Culture programme?
Great, thanks. Régis and Stuart, some of this sort of short, small anecdote?
So I think there are 5 themes that are relevant to all of you in the context of this extraordinary competition. Access and participation in the arts, education and learning through the arts, but also youth, migration and integration. And I think that interestingly with the example of Hull, we sort of funding across all of these, and people have been quite canny in thinking about where to apply. So we are supporting an extraordinary youth venue called the Warren, which is at the heart of the city, and is a really important community asset, and is actually taking part in the cultural celebration. We're doing an education program with the PRS for Music Foundation, which is in all of these schools, wonderful new build, but really interesting program. And we're supporting Freedom Festival, which actually is a festival of ideas as well as music, but it comes from slavery and freedom. And we're supporting Hull Trock Theatre. So I think for you, obviously, access and participation in the arts is the obvious thing to think about. And it will hit in various ways. It will be bringing people to venues. It will be working with people in their local community hubs or centres. So it's in or out of cultural institution. It's also about partnership building. One strand of funding which I'd like to mention, all of this is on our website, and I welcome your comments on whether or not it makes sense to you. But actually we're interested in how you understand the impact of your work. And I think we're a long-term funder. We have long-term funding relationships. So one specific strand of funding that we have is about arts evidence. How do you know you're making a difference? So anecdotally, you might say, this change is live. But, are you asking the question 35 years later when your 5-year-old is actually looking back and saying that was a defining moment? All the cultural world uses these analogies, but very few actually take the time to think about what it would take to measure what it is that you're doing. So actually, it might be that the way we could be helpful is to give you the resource to really think about what you're doing and how it is impacting on the people you're working with, and do something that is a bit transversal and a bit long-term. We just done the largest youth-led museum participation project in the country. We've invested 5 million across 8 sites, but we've invested nearly £800,000 in youth-led evaluation. So when we say we care about understanding impact, we sort of, deliver an element of financial support too. So don't just be narrow in how you think about using us as a funder. If you are thinking holistically about all of the organizations, the third sector, the commercial organization, the cultural organization in your borough, try and think about funders in that linked way. Try and, join the dots from that side as well, not just in the offer and the cultural writing of the bid.
Great. I'm aware of time, so Stuart, if you can tell us a little bit about from HLF,
Sure.
from your point of view. Then
Well, it's very similar really to what Joyce and Régis said, because for us it is about people and their engagement. I think we're very fortunate that we live and work in a city where, heritage is everywhere. You trip over it, literally. It's around every single corner. And for us it is about giving boroughs the opportunity to really shine a light on that, to explore it, to bring it out, to get people excited and passionate about it. An example is we're funding a project in Kingston about the music heritage. The music industry was a huge employer in Kingston in the 70s and the 80s. And some of the young people who are involved in this project are astonished that these big musical legends have a connection to where they live. And it's really interesting to see how they're reacting to that suddenly the place where they live isn't that place that's, dull and boring and actually is difficult to get to and from and no one likes going to. Suddenly it's the place where Bowie and Jagger and The Who have a connection. So it changes completely the view of where they live, and that's what we want to bring out more of.
Brilliant. Stella, so we are also thinking about, there's obviously these guys here who are doing really, really major deep work in terms of arts and social engagement. But there's a whole range of other funders and partners we can be looking at, including business districts. Tell us a little bit more about working
Indeed.
across.
Well, some of you will have business improvement districts, and those are very good partners for work that happens in and amongst their members. I haven't had great success, I must say, working with business investment districts. I keep telling you things that failed. Haven't had great success with crowdfunding either, but I think I know how to do it better. Crowdfunding really requires a lot of energy and a really clear planning period where you think, what is the thing that we are going to offer? It's got to be really precise, and you've got to make a really clear proposal to the people who are going to put money into your crowdfunding, and you've got to keep going. Once you've launched it, you've got to keep going day after day, building your campaign, keeping at it all the way through, looking at your targets, saying you're nearly there, getting the message out, and you really need a team for that. And of course, if people perceive it's a local authority trying to do crowdfunding, I think that might already be dead in the water. So it's probably about identifying one of your partners who could lead it. And they might only be a small organisation. You need to build, you need to bring some bodies in to help them with the activity. But crowdfunding can be very successful and can set people on fire with a really exciting project where they can see a really tangible contribution to it. And on the business front, I'm working currently with Redcar and Cleveland Council. They don't have a lot of money, but of course they've got lots of relationships with businesses in the area. So start with who you know. Start your conversations with businesses that you've already got a relationship with. They're your suppliers, they're your recycling facility, or they're your solicitors, or they're your printers. Start with those relationships and have that conversation and find that point of connection. And as somebody said earlier, don't make assumptions about what it is they might want out of the relationship. I've got a local company on board now. I thought they wanted high-profile visibility of their name and perhaps some great big piece of art in the middle of the countryside saying who they were. But actually what they really wanted was to be associated with the volunteer programme and for some of their staff to volunteer. So it's about, you have to have those conversations with the people you know, find the point of connection, and it might take quite a long time to find out what it is. And of course it's not always about cash.
Yeah.
Frequently, what they can offer you in kind, in terms of materials, or in terms of staff, or in terms of space or venues, locations for activity to happen in. Because I'm running a festival of thrift and sustainability, of course I'm quite happy with leftover cardboard and hardly used tools, etc. But I'm also being offered giant marquees, very handy, and all of those kinds of things. So it's about really squeezing the pips out of those conversations.
And Paul, to you, tell us a little bit about, we spoke about crowdfunding, and there's also other funding that's available.
Couple of strands of funding. Just following on from the crowdfunding, we've now been running for the past 2 or 3 years a crowdfunding program where the mayor pledges money towards projects. We've been developing that over time. It was quite difficult when we started off, quite difficult to work out how to target it, how to make sure the message got out there, how to get people involved. We've just closed the latest round, and we're now looking at 80 different projects across London from community groups who have posted their ideas, and they've also indicated that they want to receive a pledge from the mayor. That pledge from the mayor can be anything from a few pounds up to 50k now, so it can be a substantial pledge of money. Moving forward, we've got up to £4 million over the next 4 years. So it is something that worth people having in their heads when they're looking at their programs moving forward, whether those kind of crowdfunding ideas would be something that they might be able to incorporate into their Borough of Culture ideas. They're separate funding strands, but I think it is an opportunity to go out there, try and spread the message, involve a much wider range of people than you might do otherwise. Our experience of the crowdfunding projects is that some of them have been absolutely amazing. They are quite resource intensive though. And although you get great ideas from the groups that come forward, they're people that know their areas really well. They've often got a passion for what they're delivering, but they can be completely clueless about how they're going to deliver it. And if you start to talk to somebody about due diligence, they'll look at you blankly and won't have a clue what you're talking about. But of course, there is some public money going into these projects, so there does need to be some scrutiny of what's being delivered. The other thing in terms of crowdfunding that I'd say is that you have to work hard to get the message out there to the people who probably need it most. And that the people who most immediately know about the crowdfunding techniques may not be the people who most need the funding. The people who will know about social media, know about posting something online. So it's actually providing information to people about how they access that funding is as important as the funding being there. That's the first chunk of money that might be available, that is available, that might be worth looking at in terms of supporting cultural and community projects. The second one is the larger capital fund, the thing that was launched yesterday. And in your packs, you should have a little one-pager on the Good Growth Fund. This is the latest round of regeneration funding coming through the Local Economic Action Partnership, so that's London's LEP. This is a fund which is looking at inclusive growth. So it means using the regeneration money that we've got to try and look at how we can address inequality and address deprivation. There's three main themes for the programme. They're about empowering people, making better places, and growing prosperity. All of those three themes interlinked. And if you look at on your sheet, it'll show you the kind of actions that we are looking to fund through the programme, working through boroughs, but also through other organisations as well. And one of the messages I'd like people in the room here to take away is to go back to their boroughs and introduce them to this fund and say it's not just you, the boroughs, and you, the arts organisations that can bid, but other community organisations as well. We want to try and spread the message as wide as we can. The 8 themes that we've got are about developing civic infrastructure, backing small business, securing and creating workspace, driving innovation, building skills and employability, delivering community-led regeneration, enhancing public space, and sharing culture. And although only one of those explicitly mentions culture, I think there is a golden thread running through all of those themes, which is about culture. It's about culture in terms of the everyday life of places, all of the things that happen in places. It's about informal culture. It's about everyday culture and the way that's expressed in places. And it's also about formal culture and cultural venues and more specific investment in those kind of things. Just in terms of giving an idea of the kind of projects that sharing culture theme we're thinking might fund, that means investing in new cultural infrastructure or existing cultural infrastructure, building on the area's heritage, identity, cultural sector, local assets, institutions, and nighttime economy, enabling access to music venues, cinemas, galleries and theatres, encouraging participation by facilitating cultural activity in everyday settings, and that includes community centres, very importantly local high streets, parks, allotments and libraries, protecting and enhancing, providing affordable studio space and grassroots cultural venues, supporting cultural sector SMEs that contribute to the character and identity of places, and creating opportunities within the cultural sector that can boost the local economy, jobs and skills. So very broadly looking at culture, but linking it specifically to place. That funding package starts at around 68 million, we think, over the next 4 years. So not a massive amount for London, but it can fund significant projects. We are looking at projects that would be starts at probably a couple of 100,000 up to around 2 million. But we may also look over that period of years at projects that are up to 5 million. And the kind of money that's available is both direct grants, but also loans and repayable grants. And there is also linked to this programme European Social Fund money, so some revenue, although all I've mentioned so far is capital, there is some revenue funding as well. So as I said earlier, I think one of the opportunities is to try and align the London Borough of Culture revenue performance events with this opportunity to enhance the infrastructure for the longer term and for those short-term events. And we can do that both, so you can bid now, so the bidding round, there's a bidding round open now, but there will be a series of bidding rounds over the next 4 years, and the idea is it's open all of the time. So it may be that you bid now at the same time as you're preparing your Borough of Culture bid. It could be that you bid later on, once you know whether you're successful or not, for a particular project that's linked to the Borough of Culture thing. They'll be assessed separately from the Borough of Culture, but we'll take into account, as we would any kind of attempt to have a joined-up strategy, the Borough of Culture element to any bid that comes in. Sorry, that was a bit long-winded, wasn't it?
No, but
Hopefully
really useful, I think, really important. Okay, we've got about 10 minutes, I think. Sorry, I didn't even look in your direction at all. I was too engrossed up here. So any questions? Any questions, any thoughts? There's lots to think about. There's definitely the things that I'm, in terms of looking at the link between all of you up here, I was thinking that there's something around this, how this London Borough of Culture opportunity is really going right from the individual, which is what you were talking about, Joyce, with the boy with the violin, right through to the social skills, employment, and history and place, right into buildings and potential infrastructure. So there's a kind of, it's really about that long-term development of place rather than a kind of, I think, the firework opportunity, someone said, in the sounds of things.
I think it's interesting what we've heard from Stella and others today about how that kind of burst of activity over a year, what's happening in Hull now, etc.,
Yes.
the activity that goes on, actually the impact 3, 4, 5 years down the line, local authorities investing in culture, local authorities embedding it within other plans, well-being plans, regeneration plans, education. I'm always hearing sort of museums saying, oh, but we've been put into the Department of Waste and Recycling now because no one knows what to do with this. But actually this is a real opportunity to say we're really important in terms of how we deliver cultural services. It's something that people want, it's something people enjoy, it's something that people adds value to their life. We've done lots of research about the importance of culture and heritage to people's lives. People enjoy it, it enriches your life, it gives you new opportunity and skills and development. And actually getting people to take that seriously and strategically much more long term is really, really critically important.
And I think that long term,
And it's not necessarily a bad thing if a museum is embedded in a different department, because you find the point of connection, you find that engagement. I mean, I had members of our environment team, our economic regeneration team, sitting on my planning group for a year, and they had this image of what the festival was going to be like, some kind of glorified jumble sale, and you should have seen their faces when they got there. They were completely transformed, and now they're the biggest advocates. And it's a shame in a way that sometimes people from different departments have to wait to really experience something to get it, and you can't persuade them by the power of your oratory. But but once you've got that engagement, and once you've got that partnership and that understanding from different teams within your authority, it's superb, and it unlocks loads of other doors.
I mean, one of the funding streams that might be worth looking at, and again, this reflects the ambition of the Mayor to try and incorporate culture in each of the strategies, is the transport strategy and funding from Transport for London. They have within the transport strategy a theme called Healthy Streets, and some of that's about moving people through and getting people to work on time, but quite a lot of it is about those places being pleasant places to be, to linger, to walk, and a lot of that is about having cultural activity going on in those streets, as I say, everyday activity, events, festivals, those kind of things. So also explore with your transport colleagues bids to Transport for London for borough schemes that look at using the public realm as a stage for cultural activity.
I think there's something about mid to long term too. I mean, throughout the morning and this afternoon, there's a message that's coming across, which is you don't just put all of this effort together for 1 year of work. And actually, a lot of the conversation that you will start in the 5 months of your bid will only come to fruition, even perhaps maybe after your year of funding or your year will have come together. But I think that mid to long term is where you make the difference. And I think in your narrative, one of the questions earlier on is, what makes a good bid. And I think the ability to articulate clearly why you're doing it and where it fits in a regeneration trajectory and in making it a better place is really, really vital. And I think one of the great lessons from Derry to Hull thinking about is that actually Hull has really throughout articulated that they're on it for the long term, and they started before, well before the bid was being cooked up, by investing in schools and in other places. So from your point of view, if you can align all of the effort that you are putting into making your borough a better place on all fronts and articulate how that fits within this particular competition, I think you will have your head above the parapet.
And 2 years
I think
isn't a long time. I mean, between 2019, 2020. So it is the start of something, it
absolutely.
sounds like, rather than, yeah. Come on, last chance. Last chance, Louise. Any questions?
Tea.
Guys with pots of money, I can't believe I haven't got questions. Normally it's like...
I think it's maybe time to have some refreshments. But first of all, can I just say thank you